Hi, everyone. Anyone who wants to put on their camera, please feel free if you would like. We won't be on this gallery view the whole entire time, but we will for a little while. But thank you so much for coming today. Welcome to the first Berks Family Business Alliance workshop of 2022. While it's the first event of the year, it's a follow-up actually to an excellent conversation we had in 2021, all about cybersecurity. What does it mean? Why is it important? And today we're going to hear from 4 people who live in that world, and we'll probably hear some horror stories too. I'm Rachel Bromig, Director of Events and Special Programs with the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance, and I'm the Director of the FBA program. I have the pleasure of working with an amazing group of volunteers through our FBA Council, some of who are here today, who offer guidance as to what family businesses need, from board structure to succession planning to topics just like we have today, to make sure Berks family businesses are ready for anything and can be successful. The mission of Berks FBA is to provide resources and support to family businesses. And we do that by working closely with family businesses. And I know we have some family businesses on here today, thanks for coming, but also just businesses in general who work every day to support other family businesses in business. These are our sponsors, and I'd like to thank them personally for the first time in 2022. Our founding partners, who were with us from the beginning, also known as our major sponsors, are BB&T, now Truist, Kozloff Stout Attorneys, Force Packaging, and RKL LLP. Our signature event sponsor is the Stevens and Lee Companies. Our program sponsor is Mosteller and Associates, now merged with Herbine and Company. And our family champion sponsors are Dolan Construction, Orrstown Bank, Paul W. Essig, and Redner's Markets Incorporated. Can't thank you all enough for everything you do and the contributions you make for both time and advice to our program. And now I'd like to introduce you to our cybersecurity panel members. While we have our panel members share their expertise, we'll be asking questions of them to answer. If you have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat and we'll bring it to the front for the panelists to answer. If you also heard earlier, we're also recording this event. So first, we have Anthony Cardellaro Jr., Vice President of Weidenhammer's Digital Platforms Division. We have Eric Roebuck, owner and founder of the Valander Group, Detective Robert Long from the Spring Township Police Department, and Brady West, Vice President of Rothenberger Insurance. I'm going to spotlight them in a moment, but I'd like to thank you all for being here today. And from our previous cybersecurity presentation, and to prep for this event, I was sharing with them before you all hopped on, I decided that the swag for another special program was going to be camera covers. And I think it was the best decision I made for the year, because after hearing some of the stories that were shared and what we're going to talk about today, I had to make the decision and I bought hundreds of them. But that's a good way to get started, I think. Let me spotlight everyone and we will ask some questions. So spotlight first, meet Eric.
Hi, my name is Eric Roebuck. I am the CEO of the Valander Group. We're a cybersecurity company, helps folks protect themselves in the cyber world. I have my CISSP. I'm a certified ethical hacker. I'm also a retired military guy.
Thank you. Next up, we have Anthony.
Good morning, everyone. I am the Vice President of at Weidenhammer of the what we call our digital platforms or Hammer Tech division at Weidenhammer, responsible for managed services, hosting, cloud, our value-added reseller division, and also our professional engineering services. Been IT industry for nearly 30 years. Served as a CIO, as a consulting CIO for 25 of those years before joining Weidenhammer. And have served now as vice president for a number of years, helping to lead the division, and which includes our cybersecurity practice as well.
Great, thank you so much for being here. We have Detective Robert Long. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Detective Robert Long, yes, I've been here with Spring Township Police since 2004. I've been a police officer since 1989. In my current role with criminal investigations, I am also assigned to the Philadelphia FBI Task Force for Cybercrime. I have extensive training in computer forensics, cell phone forensics, and cyber-related crimes. So it's something that I've been involved with for quite a few years, and look forward to the panel here and having some great discussions about what's going on out there.
Thank you. The stories that you have, I'm sure. And we have Brady West. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Brady West, Vice President Rothenberger Insurance. I specialize in doing insurance reviews for individuals and businesses to make sure they're not sacrificing coverage to save a penny that'll cost them thousands down the line. And one of those things is cyber insurance. Most people don't realize they need to have it in the current market trends. So I'm one of the few agents out there that does extensive continuing ed to stay on top of the trends in the insurance world and making sure people are properly insured.
Thank you for being here. And we're going to talk about that as well, and why it's so important. But to get us started, so I have this webcam cover, but you know, Anthony, you shared so much in 2021 with us about just the generalities of cybersecurity, but I don't think that I personally have any information that would be worth anything for hackers. So, and I think a lot of people feel that way. So why should I even care about cybersecurity?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of folks that we encounter, especially small and family-owned businesses, the first statement they make is that, you know, we're small business. You know, what information or why would we be a target for bad actors? And the answer is that, you know, there are several reasons. First and foremost is that there's more information available to the bad actor in your systems than you think there is. They're not just looking for information on your customer. So you may be looking at this saying, well, my customers are such that we don't gather a lot of information on them. You know, the nature of our business doesn't really require us to gather that kind of information. But they're not just looking at just your client information. They're also looking at employee information and other things as well. So that's first. So part of the process of going through a cybersecurity assessment would help you understand what type of information may be in your systems and, you know, kind of assessing the risk factors. Because I think that would be eye-opening for organizations to realize that there's more information in those systems and in the data than you think there is. The second part is that regardless of the information, if there was ever an attack, a successful attack, and information was accessed, in Pennsylvania and other states, there is what's known as a breach notification requirement. Now, each state differs in terms of their compliance requirements, but you are required to notify those affected individuals. So they could be your employees, they could be your clients, both, but you are required to notify them. Even if you're not sure what information may have been accessed, you do need to notify them in some form to say that information may have been accessed or been seen by you know, potentially bad actors. That has harm to your reputation as a business owner. So there's another reason why business owners should really take cybersecurity seriously. The third thing is that oftentimes bad actors will also use your environment for as a springboard to launch other attacks on other organizations. So they've come in, they were successful in getting into your systems in some fashion, and then now they've gotten what they can, if anything, out of the information that you may or may not have. But now they're using your infrastructure, your systems, your servers, your computers, whatever, to launch other attacks against other organizations that may have nothing to do with you, or may, but they're using your systems to then facilitate those cyber attacks. Because your systems were vulnerable, they can use your systems to help facilitate those. And it gives them another layer of kind of transparency or you know, anonymity, so that they have, you know, another layer in between. So it's harder for you know, investigators to find them. So there are a number of reasons why organizations should really take these things seriously.
Thank you. And one of the things I know, Detective Long, you had mentioned that business email compromise is one of those things that businesses are really, it's the biggest cyber threat you're seeing to local businesses, correct?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest threat as far as the amount of money that's involved in potential loss. Unfortunately, with a small to mid-sized business, it could cause severe damage. And we're talking about business email compromise. We kind of define it as a scam that targets a business that regularly performs wire transfers, as opposed to what we would call an email account compromise, which targets individuals who perform wire transfers. We see a lot of it in the real estate section with realtors and people getting compromised through legitimate business accounts, and how those accounts are compromised through social engineering, through computer intrusion techniques, through a variety of ways. And we can go further into detail on that, but basically what happens is a compromise takes place, and the bad guy basically gets in between you and who you're sending your money to, or who you thought you were sending your money to. And that money is then transferred to another account that you may not realize at the moment has occurred. So it's a lot of times what we look at for future is, you really got to train your employees on what to look out for. And when we're talking about these accounts, they could vary, or these compromises, they could vary in size from just a few $1,000s to two I've just had in the last month, that one was 125 and one was $250,000. Local businesses here in the area that were targeted and compromised. It's a very large problem for a lot of small businesses that they don't realize is out there, and that could be something that could affect them.
So an example of that is I get an email from my CEO asking me to do something, and he's not my CEO, and I'm clicking on that link.
Yes, that would be one example. So basically what would happen is the bad guys would basically compromise either your email servers or through other various ways that they could get into your system and monitor your transfers. We see a lot of times that bad guys can be in a system up to 6 months before an incident even occurs, sometimes longer. I think, I don't know, I'd refer to Eric and Anthony on that one. I think the latest is 6 to 9 months before an incident even occurs. They're shaking their heads. So good, I got that right. But what happens is they get in there and they'll pose as your CEO or your financial officer, your CFO, and say, hey, quick change on this payment to company B. We need you to send the money to this account. And they'll give you the account numbers, and it'll look legitimate. And sometimes if it came from within your network, it could very well be legitimate. We also see them coming from outside the network. And that's where training comes in to recognize what's there, what's real and what's not, and try and stop it before it happens. A lot of times, unfortunately, once it happens, it's very difficult to get the money back.
Yeah. And so that's a good segue over to Eric. So, what is the first, if they're in your system for 6 to 9 months, like what is the first step to that hack, and how can we protect ourselves? And then we'll hop over to Brady to talk a little bit about the insurance part of it.
Well, I was thinking about this and how to approach this, and I think that there's a one-to-one relationship between the cyber world and kind of what I went through in the military. So if you go into the military, the first thing you do is go through basic training, or if you become an officer, you got to go through officer training. And there's drill sergeants everywhere, and they're trying to teach you the military world, because it's much different than the civilian world. And they always tell you, do what I tell you to do, or you're going to be an object of opportunity. The drill sergeants are going to come after you if you're walking around with your shirt hanging out, or with your boots not shined, or whatever it is. You're just going to get creamed, because obviously you don't understand what we're trying to tell you. You're not following instructions. You're not doing the things you need to do in this world. And they're going to come up and make sure you do them. And they're going to yell in your ear and make you do push-ups and all those things. That's certainly a one-to-one example over to the cyber world. If you as company leaders don't understand what's going on in the cyber world, you can't protect yourself from it. You have to understand that there's something called open source intelligence gathering, where there's stuff on the internet, and there's tools on the internet where I can go And if you've made mistakes, download your log files, download your password files. I can go to places like Shodan and bring up all sorts of information, including maybe your camera that's in your place of business or in your home that you haven't secured. Just because you're in your office doesn't mean people can't see what you're doing if you don't understand what's in the cyber world. There's when people are doing a hack, there's many different reasons why, but one of them is because you've allowed yourself to be low-hanging fruit. You've put things out there for the public to see, and you don't even know you did it, that somebody in a different country can find on the internet and open you up to allow them in. You let the wrong port open, or you have an open FTP server and you have no idea in the world, or you just had a vulnerability scan and you put it in the wrong place and now it's on Google. So you have to, from the top down, be educated in this world that most business leaders are not.
A question came in about employing a two-step verification process so you don't get hacked. Is that helpful?
May I answer that? It's needed but not sufficient. Multi-factor authentication is becoming not just something that you do, it's something you're required to do by insurance companies. If you don't, you're leaving yourself much more open. But just like everything else, that doesn't mean you're not hackable. Multi-factor authentication is certainly hackable. That's one step in many steps that you need to take. But the answer is absolutely you should do two-factor authentication, but that's just a good step, first step.
Okay. And Brady, I saw you shaking your head. So in terms of keeping yourself safe from an insurance perspective, and we're going to pop around and talk a little bit about all the things that you can do to protect yourself. What is it that people should be looking at when they're looking for a cybersecurity policy? I mean, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, well, the insurance world has changed significantly in the last year. If this conversation would have been a year ago, you could have gotten away with getting a policy with, all right, we had multi-factor authentication, but we didn't have an IT company on hand doing training, or, we may have let something slide where some of the computers had some stuff and not all computers were under the firewall, or we weren't using VPNs for our remote employees. Nowadays, unless you cross every T and dot every I, insurance carriers aren't even looking at you. An insurance policy for cyber a year or 2 years ago could have been an add-on onto your business owner policy. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that's great. It's cyber, I'm covered. Not looking at the underlying limits and what actually was needed for coverage. And one of the biggest things when I talk to people about cyber insurance is I ask, well, if you have a cyber attack, what do you think is the highest cost in a cyber claim? And most people say, well, it's the lawsuits for me for the company losing the data. Target, Home Depot, all those big companies. On the news, it's, hey, lawsuits left and right. These people lost all these clients' information, all the credit cards, everything that was stored. That's actually only 4% of the claims. 96% of insurance claims in the cyber world are first party. And when I say that, I mean direct business loss. So Anthony had mentioned about how even if you have a cyber event, you're not sure what was stolen, you have to inform everyone who may have had their information compromised. That costs money. You have to have someone like Detective Long to do the investigation, see where things come in. That costs money. Your PR, your reputation, that costs money to get people out there and get ahead of it so that your business does not tank. And the last data I had was in 2020, over 60% of the businesses that had a cyber attack closed within the first 6 months. I'm pretty sure that has gone up in 2021 because the amount of claims have gone up. A couple of years ago, you could look at a cyber ransom was $100,000. Then it was averaging about 450 in 2020. First quarter of 2021, the average ransom jumped actually to over $1.2 million. I'm not sure how many businesses out there could just pull $1.2 million out of the bank and say, yep, nope, I can keep going. This was a drop in the bucket. So really what you want to look at in the insurance world for cyber is the proper coverage and not just the cheapest coverage. Too many times we see people trying to be spendthrift and just looking at the bottom dollar and not realizing what they are sacrificing.
And you had mentioned, you know, how much money you have to spend when this happens. And one of the things I wanted to ask Anthony was, so as you're setting up steps to keep yourself secure, you know, obviously a good quote from an insurance agent comes with the different things you have in place. What are the things that you can do, like 1, 2, 3, to get yourself set up, and how much time and money will that cost just to get things set up in your system so that you make yourself less likely to be hacked?
So a good first step really is to reach out to someone like Brady to start talking about insurance coverage. So whether you have it or whether you need it, you need to start engaging your insurance carrier or an insurance carrier in general to understand what coverages are there, what's right for your business to mitigate risk, because that's going to kind of set the compass on where you need to head. Once you get an understanding of that, Brady's going to help you understand what you need to close the gap in terms of what the insurance carriers are looking for and what are the gaps in what you have today in terms of cybersecurity awareness, infrastructure, the technology, the software, and the techniques that you need to mitigate those risks. At that point, the next step would be to bring in someone who can help you do an assessment to say, okay, we know where you're headed. We know what you're trying to achieve. Now let's take a look at where you are. Let's take a look at the snapshot in time and see what are the gaps between today and tomorrow. And let's start to plot a course to get you where you need to go, and start to do that in an economical fashion, but do that in an expedited way so we can get you where you need to be according to your timeline. And that oftentimes will help, because as you're working with the insurance broker and the carrier, you're trying to work together to get to the right policy for the right price with the right mitigation steps and the right process in place, so that all of you, all parties are mutually agreeable and are spending what you want to spend, mitigating the right risks. And it's kind of the right size policy, the right size measures. Oftentimes when organizations do that in reverse and they bring in an assessor to look at the environment, the assessor is going to look at this and say, this is where you are and you really should be here. And sometimes that often leads to kind of overbuying and overspending and overshooting what's needed, or potentially underbuying or undershooting what's needed. So really working together with the carrier, with the insurance carrier and the broker, and understanding what's needed for the business between the business owner, the broker, the insurance carrier, and the technology provider, really kind of helps sets the plan and mitigate the right risks for the business to get you on the straight and narrow. So that's step 1 and step 2. And then obviously step 3 is to execute that plan and start to make those investments smartly and follow the plan that you've now agreed to. It often includes some technology, right? You're going to be purchasing some technological things. Shiny boxes are going to be bought to be implemented to protect the network and the workstations. You're going to buy some software to protect the computers and the laptops and the things that you give your employees. And you're also going to be purchasing some training. We talked about that. Detective Long mentioned it early on about user awareness training, which is where you're really making sure your staff understands the difference between a valid email and a not valid, an invalid email, or a bad actor sending an email to them looking for something. So that comes down to user awareness training, and that often comes out as part of the assessment findings. Educating the users, Eric mentioned, living in this world, understanding what it's like to live in the cyber world. That's where the user awareness training comes in. That is always part of the recipe. Someone mentioned multi-factor authentication, oftentimes part of the recipe. It's all about defense in depth. When we talk about cybersecurity, you want to add layers to this defense strategy. But putting that recipe together comes by way of the assessment, and that's helpful in working in concert between the business owner, the insurance carrier, with the technology provider to say, okay, here's where we want to get to. It's important because getting all of the stakeholders involved, especially the business owner, and depending upon the size of the business, if there are other leadership team members, making sure everyone's on board, it really needs to be evangelized across the company. So once we've agreed that we're going to do this, we've set the direction, we start to navigate in that direction. The business owner really needs to evangelize this across the organization. And that is critical, because the employees will buy in, and then ultimately that will foster this engagement across the organization.
Brady, then what would you say are the main items you should look for in a cyber policy when you're starting to get into that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, 96% of the claims are first party. So really what I tell people when you're looking at a cyber policy, yes, it's nice to see $1 million in liability for lawsuit stuff like that. But really what you want to make sure is protect your assets. So policies should have money in there to help pay for the lawyers, the investigation, the informing of clients. I mean, even though some of those things don't cost a lot per client, they do add up. Downtime. We're starting to see a lot of the carriers adding on income loss, business income, because you have to temporarily shut your business down. Or we actually had an example, a veterinary office. It was a national chain. They were hacked and had the ransom. Well, it was paid and everything should have been fine, but all their hardware was damaged across all the boards. So for 6 months after, they had to do every note, everything by hand until they could get their systems back up and running. How much extra money did that cost in efficiency, hiring extra employees just to handle the paperwork, the handwriting, everything that we take for granted using technology? That's extra cost when that's not there for our convenience. So really you want to look at an insurance policy that has money in there for the ransom, has extra money in there for the income loss, has money in for replacement of hardware, hiring outside sources to come in and help get you back to where you need to be. Because I don't know how many businesses hire extra employees just sitting around waiting to handle extra work that you never had before. Most of us don't. Most of us, we have our crew, we're efficient, we have what we do, we expand what we need. But after a cyber attack, what you need done exponentially grows. So that's what you want to look in a cyber policy, and watch the sublimits, talk to your insurance agent, and also work with your IT company, your cybersecurity company, to see where they're handling some stuff and where some items, as Anthony said, you might not need to purchase higher amounts because the risk was mitigated elsewhere. And that's really what insurance is mitigating your risk. How much are you willing to keep on your shoulders, but how much do you need to pass off to someone else?
Okay. Now, I mean, Eric and Detective Long and Anthony, anyone who wants to give into this, how do these cyber criminals, bad guys, bad actors learn to do these things? I mean, is there like this school for bad guys? Is it the dark web? Like what's happening here? How does it come to be?
I'll take a shot at that. So you have different levels of people doing this, from script kiddies all the way up to experts. What I show people when I give my presentations is that there's a centralized Linux distros called Kali that has all sorts of tools in it for you to be able to go hack, for you to be able to hack passwords or whatever you're doing. And every one of those tools has hours of free tutorial videos on YouTube or many other places on the internet. So all the information to be able to use these tools that are out there, like John the Ripper or Hydra or Aircrack NG, and all these tools that we use are easy to use, are easy to learn out on YouTube. You just search for them and there's hours and hours of videos.
That's crazy to hear.
Well, you
So-
got to remember, a lot of questions that I get after I show people that are why, how can that be, and do they allow it? Well, first of all, people like me have to learn too, right? The good guys have to go out there and learn all these tools to be able to do a penetration test, to hack into somebody's system that asks me to, so that I can come up and say, this is where you want to protect yourself. But of course, there's unintended consequences to everything. Anybody can put something up on YouTube. So so hackers put up, here's a new tool and here's how you use it.
Detective Long, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of add on to that. What we are seeing more and more is a lot of criminals today. It's not so much the Hollywood hacker as it used to be. We're seeing a lot of things change in the realm of how people learn to do this. And I agree with what Eric said. You know, I was taught in my classes and all the training that I've done, basically they teach you how to hack. So you can catch somebody and figure out how they did it. But that doesn't necessarily happen for the bad guys. What they do is they do use Reddit, and we see a lot of exchanges, even in, interestingly enough, Discord gaming platforms. A lot of these, the new criminal element that's doing this is learning in these programs, in these gaming platforms. They talk to each other and they talk about how to scam people and how to hack people, for lack of a better term. And it's becoming quite a problem with the amount of people who are learning how to do this stuff. And it's expanding into, a lot of it expanding into gangs and street crimes, because the bad guys know they can get away with this and get a much lesser sentence if it's a state crime versus a federal crime, depending on what happens. But it's possible they could get a slap on the wrist and just owe the money back. So we're seeing it, you know, a lot of these criminal gang elements using it to make money. And it's, you know, it's a little bit scary when, you know, anybody can learn how to do it pretty quickly, whether it's through YouTube, Reddit, or some other platform. It's difficult to keep on top of.
Yeah.
I would just add that I would just add that, you know, to kind of build on that, you know, many years ago when we probably all first got into the industry, the motivating factor for these bad actors was the thrill, right? They would do it because they wanted to learn, and they would do it because they wanted to say they could. Now it's money. Now it's because there's a payday. This is $1 billion today. It's $1 billion industry, and they're getting away with it, frankly. And that's the scary part. And they're organizing themselves and becoming better and better at it as the years progress, which is, you know, again, scary. You know, oftentimes when I speak, most recently, I've highlighted the CNA hack that happened last year, where CNA Insurance where there was a breach at CNA Insurance last year, where bad actors broke into their systems to get information on cyber insurance policyholders. CNA Insurance is one of the largest insurance brokers for cyber liability insurance. Bad actors broke into their insurance policyholder information to see what their policy limits were for ransomware attacks. It was a very specific attack. And it's because they want to know how much money to ask for when and if they were to get one of their policyholders into that position. That's how sophisticated they are. So it really is now a business for them, and not really a crime of, you know, just because I can, and bragging rights. Yet another reason why business owners, small to enterprise size, really need to take these things seriously.
Yeah, I've said that often in a lot of my presentations. This is their job. You know, in a lot of cases, it's their job, and it's what they're out there trying to do every day. And I mean, they will not only research your insurance, they'll research your company, find out how much money you make, how much you can afford to give. You know, they're not going to ask you for $500,000 for a ransomware attack if you don't have that kind of money. They'll ask you for $50,000. You know, so it's something that's definitely like I said, it's their job. Anthony hit it right on the head. This is what they do.
May I add to that? When I speak, I always tell people to close their eyes and envision what they think a hacker looks like. And what people many times envision is somebody living in their parents' basement. They're probably 28 years old and should have been gone a long time ago. They haven't shaved, they're overweight, they're eating Pop-Tarts, all these stereotypical things. And I try to tell people that is not at all true. There's companies with 401k plans and medical insurance and R&D departments that are hacking. There's countries. We underestimate the hackers so badly that it's hurting us. If there's one thing on this whole conversation I want to get across to people, is that these people that are hacking are brilliant, they're organized, and they're more clever than we are. They are proactive, we are reactive. You have to understand that to make sure that you take it seriously enough to put a moat around your business so they can't get in. Because if you don't, they are smarter than us and they will get in.
One of the questions that came in the chat was just speaking of that safety, is there a difference in risk if you use a local server versus a cloud base?
May I give that one a try? So I'm a certified AWS practitioner, which means I know a little bit about the cloud. Generally, yes, of course, there's a difference. However, what a cloud based program is going to give you the tools to be secure. It's going to give you an easy firewall to set up that you can do. You can put it in a virtual private cloud. But what they do and what you sign when you go to use them is they say, we will take care of the physical security. The digital security, the firewalls that we give you is your responsibility. So you certainly can go to the cloud and set up a server, but you can also certainly set it up incorrectly and it will be just as wide open as anything else.
So there is really no risk difference if you do it wrong.
If you do it wrong, yes, there's no, if you do it wrong. I believe that the tools are there for you to do it right. I don't have to go out and buy an appliance and put it in and get it set up. I can just go in and use digital infrastructure to set it up. But it is very easy to set it up wrong if you don't know what you're doing.
Right. And one of the things that I've read about are these different methods and frameworks for your cybersecurity. So like the NIST and ISO. Anthony and Eric, I bet you could talk a lot to this. What are those and how do you know which is the right way to go for your company or for yourself?
You or me, Anthony, it's up to you, buddy.
I'll take a first swing if you like. So
Sure.
the NIST framework is the National Institute for Science and Technology. ISO is again a governmental regulation or standard across the country. Both of them are very similar. One kind of builds on the other. They are frameworks that organizations like mine and Eric's use to build a cybersecurity awareness program and a cybersecurity practice for organizations. So they are best practices for businesses to follow as it relates to cybersecurity. They set the bar at its highest level, right? It is the most secure. The NIST and ISO frameworks are really meant for, they're developed for and followed by heavily regulated industry, Department of Energy, the military, Department of Defense, things like that. They're all following the very similar frameworks, all the way down to banking, financial and insurance, things like that, and so on. Now, where do you fall into that? Well, obviously, you don't need to follow it to the same set of standards. It's kind of a framework, which is why we use that term. But we use that as a backdrop for organizations. So we use that and go through the framework and say, okay, these are things that we think you should follow in accordance with risk mitigation, in accordance with conversations with you, the business owner, with your insurance carrier and your broker. If you need to do this to follow the plan as set in discussions that we've had with your carrier broker and you as the business owner, then the way you follow that is to adhere to the NIST standard, right? But there may be things in here that might be a little bit kind of over the top for you. That, you know, you're not the Department of Energy, you're not the Department of Defense. You know, we're not trying to secure Fort Knox. Maybe these are things that are a little bit of a reach. We can put them to the side. That might be down the road. Maybe if we want to tighten the security belt, so to speak, down the road, we can put them, you know, on kind of a parking lot for the moment. But step one, let's use the framework to focus on what are the things that are really the most, you know, the highest priority for risk mitigation. But the framework really helps us identify the how. How do we implement these things and how do we adhere to that? That puts the carrier's minds at ease, because we can say to the carrier, carriers love this because we can say, we did this and we followed a framework that's acceptable across multiple organizations, to the point where the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy use it to secure their systems. And most of the times the carriers will say, okay, we're good. You know, show me you did that. Tell me how you did that. But the fact that you did that, we're happy to hear that. And that puts everyone's minds at ease. And it's not complicated for you to do it. So it's kind of, you know, in a sense, it's kind of putting your best foot forward. If you're going to do it, you might as well do it to the best way possible. And these two standards really kind of define that. Eric, I don't know.
Yeah, Anthony,
you know, maybe I missed something.
No, I absolutely agree with everything that you say. I'd like to take a stab at it from a little bit different of an angle, but certainly everything you said is completely right on the money. When I talk to companies or I stand in front of people, I say things this way. I ask, what is the most important part of a football team, an NFL football team? And people tell me it's the quarterback or the line or the coaches, and none of that is true. What's the most important part is ownership. Ownership drives direction. They decide whether they're going to be a passing team or a running team, and they tell the next level of management, this is what I want. They make the policies. It's the same thing with a company in a cybersecurity world. Leadership makes policies, right? And then you have command emphasis to make those policies come true. So the next level down makes guidelines, policies, next level down is procedures and guidelines. What the NIST 800-53 does is it gives leadership the policies they need to implement, because most times people that are running a business are trying to secure a company from a cybersecurity outlook and not having any idea in the world what policies they need. So if you look at the NIST 800-53, which is the most extensive, in which a lot of them refer back to, they have functions, and then below that they have categories. And when you click on a category, it gives you all the policies that you need to implement. Anthony's completely correct, and he said you don't have to implement them all. You know, if I'm a smaller company, if I don't have Wi-Fi, I don't have to have Wi-Fi policies. But you go through that, and leadership creates policies, and the next level down does procedures and guidelines, and that way you know what policies to implement to get your company secure. And you have to have command emphasis. Anthony called it evangelizing. Exactly, a great word. Command emphasis is more of a military word, but if leadership brings in a framework and says to the next level of management, we need to follow this, to me, that's the most valuable thing for the NIST 800-53 or the ISO 27001 or the 171, or whichever one that you want to pick.
And I saw, Brady, you nodding your head. So this framework, when someone comes to you with a framework, you're like, okay, good, let's start checking these boxes.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, for the insurance side of things, and I have a little analogy for layman people instead of all these abbreviations and all that. So let's take homeowners, your house. Everyone knows that they need locks on the doors and windows. A cybersecurity company is, putting those in place. The NSO, the NIST, or excuse me, the ISO, all that, those dictate how much and where to place the locks. Anthony had said, like, hey, these are, and Eric as well, these are the policies and procedures that you need to follow. And the guidelines are already set. So it's standardized across the board. Insurance loves it when it's standardized. If someone comes to me and say, hey, I built my own house and I have wooden log locks in here that work like this, insurance company is going to be like, hold on, we don't know how well that works. There's not enough information. We don't know either A, how to price it, so we're not going to take it, or, hey, you know what, we're not sure, so we're going to extra charge. And another analogy would be is, you know, the size of your business. You may not need every one of those policies and procedures, as they said, and you might not need security like a prison, like Fort Knox. You don't need barbed wire. You don't need cameras. You don't need infrared. You just need locks on the windows and doors, because that's what your business, and these criminals know more about your business than most people, and know what to go for. So when a company comes to me and says, hey, I need cybersecurity, and we sit down and do an application, those are actually specific questions. Do you have multi-factor authentication? Do you have these policies and procedures in place? And if you check all those boxes, it's a lot easier for me to come in and say, hey, I've got an option for you to get protected now, instead of saying, hold on, we like this, we don't like that, we need you to fix it. Now we need to bring someone else in, such as Eric, Anthony, to cover those holes where you're exposed.
Thank you. And now I'd love to ask everyone, so detective, when someone gets attacked in the cyber realm, they obviously contact their insurance agent. They're like, hey, this happened. They call the police, I'm guessing. And the fact that you're saying you're with our Spring Township Police, but you're working with the FBI, what does that look like when someone calls you? What does someone do if this happens?
Well, even before calling us, my big suggestion would be to call your financial institution if you've lost money. And it's an example, in the example of a business email compromise or any type of scam that you may have fallen for and potentially sent money to a bad guy. Contact your financial institution first and foremost. See if they can freeze the account, freeze the money before it goes anywhere. That would be, priority number one. What we would do and what we can do for any other incidences, what I would do is, my first question would be whether or not you've hired somebody like Anthony or Eric, or if you've got a company to work on it. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff in my realm there's a lot of depends. It depends on the amount involved. It depends on how it happened. If it's a situation where credit cards were skimmed off of your computers, we're going to try and get the FBI DEX team out there, which is our digital evidence recovery team or extraction team. And we're going to go out there and try and get into we're going to image your systems and try and determine where that happened, where that came from, what happened in the process. If you hire somebody, we're going to work with them to get that information as quickly as possible and to try and track down where it came from. There are, even when we talk about overseas actors, we do have some success stories of me personally and the FBI tracking down some bad guys overseas. And they were in countries at the time where we couldn't get to them, but they did move. And fortunately for us, they went to countries where we had mutual law enforcement treaties with, and we were able to pull them out of there and arrest them. So it does happen. We do get the chance to get some of these guys. And even locally too, we've had the opportunity to arrest a lot of people locally for some of these scams and compromises and hacks. Like I said earlier, it comes down with a lot of these groups, gangs and so forth, that are getting involved in some of this stuff. And we're going to do our best to track them down. Kind of went a little off track there. I hope I answered your question.
You did, and it actually leads me to hop over to Eric. Eric, you shared your screen earlier with how, when you say overseas tracking, Eric, show us what you showed us earlier, and please feel free to explain it to the group.
So there's companies out there that make appliances like routers or intrusion detection system. They also put something called a honeypots out there. which are machines that are put up that look like they're perfect for a hacker to hack into, but really they're just kind of a place for them to go and not get any information, kind of a distraction. And a lot of these companies will put up something called a threat map, and what's happening on all the appliances or honeypots that they have are reported back and put in a graphic form out there on the internet. This is one of those threat maps. This is showing real-time attack vectors going on right now all over the world. You can watch things going back and forth. Here's another one. It's from Fortinet. And these are all different. So this stuff is happening continually. This one tells me that so far today, there's been 18 million attacks. Whether they're successful, they're not successful because these are either honeypots or they've been caught, but they're at least attacks that people have tried. So this is happening continually. It's over your head, it's under your feet, and it's in the air that you're breathing. So you really have to understand the cyber world, because this gives you a nice graphical representation of what's going on out there in the world. What I try to tell people is somebody in China can see what you're doing over the internet at the speed of the internet, at the speed of something called Nmap, or theoretically the speed of light. They can see exactly what's going on. If you have a lot of these are scanning people's networks, trying to find places to hack into.
So I'd like to ask everyone, one, if you have any kind of stories that you want to share of maybe Brady, someone who decided not to take insurance and something that happened to them. And you know, we don't want to harp on the bad things that happen to people, but that really gets the point across to know, like, hey, you chose not to do this, and this is an example. And then if you don't want to share a story, that's fine, but as a cybersecurity professional, what is it that most concerns you now and maybe for the future?
Okay, I'll take a hack at it. Unless Brady, you had something, you're welcome to go.
No, that's right. I mean, the best example I have right now for people who don't take the insurance policy, it's most of those companies don't survive. And not just trying to say, hey, you need an insurance policy now, but really the biggest story I have of what happens to businesses that don't is I've had people who I've sat down with 6 months ago, and the biggest thing on the insurance world is, well, they weren't ready to take the plunge at that time. They had everything they needed. They could have gotten the policy. But insurance premiums alone have gone up 96% in the last year. So someone who I'd quoted in March, their rate had almost doubled by September. Now we're looking at the new year here. Those rates have gone up again. So I don't specifically have a story of a business that I know that didn't take insurance and got hacked, but I know of businesses that didn't get an insurance policy earlier and to cover themselves, and now the cost has gone up exponentially, and so now they're even farther behind than they were before, at least in the protection wise.
That's very much a horror story.
Yeah,
The price of it.
To see prices just for a round number starting at $1,000 2 years ago for an add-on, to being nearly, the average is about $2,000 to $3,000 for smaller businesses. That's a big premium. When you start getting into large companies and stuff like that, you're looking at tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars for an insurance premium because of the risk that you have. Or for an example, I was actually quoting someone on a Friday. We had everything good. We were ready to go for the business. Monday morning, I got the note from the underwriter stating that, hey, we're no longer taking this type of business because they're a hot ticket item to now. So now they can't even get insurance. They have everything they needed, but they could not get an insurance policy because they were the low-hanging fruit. That was the industry. So those are my horror stories. I'll leave it to the guys that see what actually happens to a business when a cyber happens.
I have a horror story that harkens back a little bit to what Anthony said. about people thinking that they don't have anything anybody wants. So I got a call from a small school, and they said, we think we got hacked. Can you come in? So I went in, and they said, we don't have anything that anybody wants. So I dug in, and the story went this way. They had a person, their IT person happened to be a math teacher, and their IT person had terrible passwords. Well, somebody somewhere figured out their password, got into their email, put up a job, like this school was trying to hire a teacher. A young person said, yeah, I want to be hired. They interviewed him, hired him, and said, here's your paperwork. Give us all your ACH information for your bank account so we can pay you. Stole all their money, and the young girl called in to ask where, what time they wanted to apply to be there for work. They had no idea in the world what this person was talking about. So because somebody in a small place was not practicing good cybersecurity, a young person got hacked and got their money stolen. That happens all the time. It is not just you and your company. It's like a big stew, right? What you do affects other people greatly.
Similar stories. We could probably talk for an hour about horror stories, and I certainly don't want to end on that kind of a note. But I could say that one thing I would say is that oftentimes what clients that come to us after an attack find is the aftermath of the attack is not what they thought it would be. So first of all, they didn't think they would be attacked. So that's shock first. Second is oftentimes systems that are affected, processes that are affected are things that they didn't think would be affected. So an example I would give you there is we had an institution of higher learning, a college, come to us and say, we were attacked, was a ransomware attack. This was in the last couple of years. And we need to deal with this. So we assisted them in some of the forensics and some of the remediation efforts. One of the things that was affected, two things that were affected. One was their point of sale system for selling meals in their cafeteria. So they were not able to process the meal cards for their student population that lived on campus. So they had to give those meals away because they could not feed students who live there. They couldn't tell who the students were coming through the line. There was no mechanism for them to check a database because the database didn't exist. They didn't have means to do that. So because of that, they just had to give that stuff away. And obviously that comes at a cost. I mean, there was not really an impact to the students. I mean, some of the students got free lunches and free dinners and free breakfasts. So they were kind of on the winning end of that. But for the organization, it was a financial hit. So that was something that they just kind of like threw their hands up and said, this is an insurance claim that we didn't think, to Brady's earlier point, these are things that first claim position that you didn't think would be on the line item for that, but they had to write these things off because it impacted them. The other part was that the system that controlled the dorm room doors, so each student had a proximity card, not a key, a physical key. They had a prox card that would unlock the door to get into their room like a hotel. That system didn't function either. So students couldn't get access to their dorm rooms. So that was an absolute chaotic disaster for them. They had extra security brought in to deal with physical keys to try and get these dorm rooms open for students. So these are things that oftentimes business leaders, organization leaders, they don't think about, that need to be considered, that you don't realize that these are things that technology touches that could potentially be negatively impacted during a cyber event that have absolutely no critical information. I mean, what does a door system have to do with making money for a potential bad actor? Nothing. But they encrypted it. They were using it as a means of ransom, and that's what it came down to. And a lot of times business owners, they don't think about it in that context because we're not wired to be criminals, right? But that's what happens. And so these are the things that I think that organizations need to think about, that all of these things are pressure points, unfortunately, are pressure points for business owners to think about. The last thing I'll say is that in my 30 years in this industry, what I can tell you for sure is that when I have dealt with clients, because I've dealt with clients on both sides of this equation. So pre-attack, they've been a customer of mine for years. We've had numerous conversations about cybersecurity, and they've not really been willing to make those investments. Something happens, and boy, does that wallet or checkbook open up quick. Don't make that mistake, because I can tell you with 1,000% certainty, it costs more after the attack. Be smart about the spend, make the investment up front, do it in a controlled manner, and that's it. To me, that makes better financial sense. So that's all I will share as far as that advice is concerned. But that makes things a lot easier, because you can plan for it, you can mitigate the risk more efficiently and more smartly, and you're not doing it on the other side of an attack where you're dealing with far more fallout that you have zero control over. But there is no other motivation for business owners to spend on security than a cyber attack. And it's you know, we sometimes, guys like Eric and I and Detective Long will laugh, but it's not funny. It's true. You know, these organizations will spend the money when and if those events happen. So I implore you not to wait. I would encourage you to go out and at least start down the process of getting your facts together and understand what it's going to take to get you more secure.
Anything from you, Detective Long? Because I do
Yeah,
have one or two more questions.
Yeah, I just want to add, just to, you asked for a couple examples. I'll give examples that can be easily relatable and easily fixed, basically. One thing Eric touched on, people posting jobs and social media statuses and so forth. Be aware of, as a business owner, what you post on your job application. If you post you need somebody that's good in A, B, and C for your company's software, well, right there, any hacker who's looking at your page is going to know what software you're using, and they're going to know how to attack it. So again, that's just something simple that we all can do, is to get in front of some of this stuff. Another thing, when it relates to business emails compromises or email account compromises, confirm. Like I said before, I've seen companies lose hundreds and thousands and in the millions in Philadelphia. And a lot of times we can't get that money back, like I said. So confirm any changes in what they're asking you to do, where they're asking you to send the money. Another example, just a simple fix. At a skimming case, one of the ones that went back over to Europe, this company, local business, was running an out-of-date point-of-sale system. And this was in 2015, and they were still running a Windows 2000 system. So yeah, I see Eric rubbing his face. It happens. Not only do you have to get these systems in and secured, but you have to stay up to date with them. And that's where companies like Eric and Anthony can help you with this stuff. Have that plan in place before something happens. Because the first thing I'm going to ask you when I get there is what was going on before this happened. Let me see what systems you're running. And, if it's an old system, sorry to say, this is why it happened. And because you could have avoided it before it happened. So that would be kind of my examples and what you could possibly do.
Thank you. And we did get 2 questions in the chat, and that's how I think we could end it. First, we did talk about the cloud versus on a server. What if all of a business's data and files are on a cloud-based server or system? Is that good, bad? Is there a higher chance of it being hacked? Is that, I'm not, Tom asked that question. If I didn't ask that properly, Tom, please let me know in the chat.
I think the answer is the same as we gave earlier. I think Eric answered the first time around as it relates to cloud systems. It's similar. I mean, the cloud providers provide you the vehicle. It's your job to drive it and maintain it safely, right? So they're going to tell you that we've provided you the means to safely and securely provide access to your data and files to your employees and yourself as an organization. But it's your job as a business owner to either monitor and maintain it through your own IT folks or through a vendor that you partner with to make sure that you use it and maintain it securely. So an example of that, a quick example of that would be, Microsoft OneDrive or things like Dropbox or Google Docs, things like that. These tools are very powerful, right? Because it allows you to have these access to these files in the cloud and gives access to essentially your employees or yourself from any device that has access to those files. One of the things that we often see is that if you're not implementing those technologies correctly and putting policies and security in place correctly, again, the system provides the switches. You just have to know which way to flip those switches correctly. So this is where having the right resources at your fingertips, the right technical folks to show you which way to flip the switches would be helpful. This is important because an example of that would be if I don't know any different and I just take it out of the box kind of default values and just implement this, not knowing any differently, I can share a folder of files that are confidential with Eric, who's not a member of my organization. Here, Eric, you have access to this. This is a project we're working on. And within this folder structure is a bunch of files. And I've given him access to this, but I didn't realize I gave him admin access to this folder because by default, the system allows me to do that. But I didn't know, that's how it worked. So I give him access. Well, because I've given him access, he then is working with Brady because he and Brady oftentimes team up together, and he then shares that file, that same folder with Brady. I don't know that, but he's doing it. Maybe it's on the up and up, but he shares it with Brady. But Brady wants to show this work to somebody else who has nothing to do with the project. He now shares it. At this point, the files are in the wind. I have no idea who has access to my stuff, all simply because I wanted to share it with Eric. Unbeknownst to me, I allowed it to be shared with him and gave him a level of access that allowed him to then reshare it with others. Simply by going into the configuration of this system, whether it's Microsoft 365 or Dropbox or Google Docs, and changing some settings would have prevented me from doing that unknowingly. So again, that example could have been mitigated by just bringing the right folks to the table to show you and demonstrate, is this really your intention? No, I don't want to do that. Okay, well then we want to turn the switch this way, turn the dial this direction so that we can secure the net a little bit better so that you're not sharing this information with folks that you don't intend to share it with. Mm-hmm. So, again, powerful tools, but you just have to understand how to use them and be willing to invest in bringing folks into the organization, whether it's through vendor partnerships or employees, to help you understand how to use those tools.
And I think that's a great way to loop in our last questions so that we could go on forever, but just to wrap it up on a positive note. So obviously the question was, is there an increased sense of urgency to get cybersecurity handled now that people are working remotely? And then on top of that, giving that example, Anthony, that you just gave about Dropbox, how can we be safer remote workers, since so many of us are working remotely, whether as an individual or a business?
I'd like to jump in real quick if I could, just from a sense of what I've seen again. So one of our latest compromises involved an employee who took his laptop home and accessed their servers from home, which is fine in and of itself. However, the employee used that laptop for everything else he was doing, including surfing the net, including looking at Instagram, Facebook, and everything else. So there's a sense of urgency from a business owner's perspective that you want to be aware of what your employees are doing from home. If they are acting or if they are accessing your servers through that computer could become compromised. And I'll leave that to Eric and Anthony, that basically, you're looking that somebody could get into your systems via that avenue. It's something that you want to be aware of with your employees. Like I said, we've had it. I've seen it just recently where this happened, and it resulted in a huge loss for the company. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick, just the thought process there.
Yeah, I could hop on the back of that, maybe going a little bit different direction. Absolutely, that's absolutely true. If people are working remotely, you have opened up holes into your network. You have to allow them in. And if you don't do that correctly, everybody working remotely is a hole for somebody to try to go after. And the big point that I want to make, I want to go back to Bob Long said that company had a Windows 2000 server up. This is what I want people to understand. As an ethical hacker, I can go into Google or Shodan, but let's talk about Google and use something called Google dorking and put in the correct search string and get thousands of Windows 2000 servers that are out there. You're not hidden. It's broadcasting to the internet if you're not up correctly. Right now, I can go get Windows 2000 servers with remote desktop enabled anonymously. And it's sitting right there on the internet for me to hack into if I want to. The bad guy's job is not all that hard. So you got to dig that moat around yourself.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, yes, the answer, to go back to the original question is, today, is it harder now given the remote workforce to secure the environments and, take cybersecurity more seriously? And the answer is yes. I mean, obviously, to Eric and Detective Long's point, we've given these bad actors more opportunity, right? Before we were all under kind of one roof, or organizations had limited number of sites or a single site and one infrastructure to try and gain access to. Now you've diversified that. People are now spread out, working from home, and you've given them many targets to look at. So you've got to take that into account, and that then goes back into your risk review process with your carrier, and you kind of start that process over. So for those of you who have gone through this already and say, Tony, been there, done that. I already have insurance coverage. I've done the assessment. I think I'm good. Okay, great. You did that 2 or 3 years ago, before today, before the remote workforce, before having, these remote employees. Have you done it recently? This really is kind of a living process. You should be doing this on an ongoing manner. I would encourage you to do this again. At least have the conversation with your broker and your carrier. Make sure that you're still in line, and if not, bring in a third party to help you from a technical perspective, because these are all good points. Eric brings up an excellent point where a lot of organizations had to pivot quickly for COVID and send employees home and didn't have laptops. Employees were used to working at their desks. They had desktops. You didn't permit them to take them home. So, they basically said, use your computer at home. You're fine. For what you need to do, you can just use it from home. The problem with that is you don't know what's on that computer, and that computer can be introducing things into your systems that you don't want. So these are all things that really need to be factored into this kind of cybersecurity recipe and reassessed and be made part of this process. Again, we go back to the NIST and the ISO, acronyms, these frameworks. They have answers to these questions. They've thought of that already. So we don't need to start over. We don't have to invent the wheel. We can say, okay, you've got remote workforce. You're providing them with the device. Here's the mobile device management policy that we would suggest you follow. Here's how you deal with it. Here's what you do. Here's the rules of the road. You share that with your team members. You're good. And that helps you be more secure and govern accordingly. So these are all things that are very important.
Brady, any last comments?
Yeah, if I can kind of finish rounding it out. The urgency here, as a business owner, it's your responsibility to protect your business, protect yourself, protect your employees, and protect your clients. Really, you have that responsibility. And the urgency is putting off what you could do today to tomorrow opens yourself up to a larger risk, higher costs, damages, the whole 9 yards. simple things as just doing those updates that Eric, Tony, and Detective Long had said, like updating your systems. Those are key. As much as we hate when our cell phone goes, hey, by the way, we're updating tonight, because it's another change. Those are security patches. Those are what's in there to protect you and your information. So definitely on the insurance side of things, cost is just astronomical and it keeps going up every day. At one point in time, people used to be like, oh, hey, you know what? I turned 25 on my auto insurance. Does my rate go down? We're not seeing rates going down in cyber, and I don't think we ever will, because of how hot of a crime it is and how the inflation of those damages. We're really just seeing things go up and up. So if you don't take those steps now, and then even if, as Anthony said, you may have done this a year or 2 years ago, hey, I already set the groundwork. Well, the world's different than what it was a year, 2 years ago. So what was fine then is not okay, not necessarily okay now. So you need to keep reviewing. Business is changing. Anytime there's a change, you might think it's minor, but that's a different risk. That is adding on, you've taken a different path. So you don't know what's down that path. So protect yourself, protect your clients, and don't wait. Talk to the people to get the information. The worst thing you can do is just be ignorant about it.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it over to Paula Barrett, our FBA chair right now, to wrap up everything.
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks so much, Eric, Anthony, Detective Long, and Brady. You have sufficiently scared the crap out of all of us. I think this was really very powerful presentation. And as horrifying as it all is, and to most of us, it seems a little overwhelming, I think the positive that I saw in this presentation is as many tools there are for the bad actors, there's a lot of tools out there for us good actors too. And so I appreciate all of the information that you experts have shared with us. And you know, there are people out there to help all of us, and we're not in it alone. So, you know, I really, this was fantastic. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days. And just to kind of piggyback, as Rachel said, I serve as chair of the FBA Council, and I'm a partner at RKL, a consulting and accounting firm. So I know too firsthand the training and what our organization continues to have to deal with as well. So, and we appreciate supporting the FBA. We try to, one of our goals is to, you know, help our family businesses, and not just family businesses, but small businesses. And, you know, we want to help you folks continue to thrive and grow by offering these type of programs. So please keep a lookout. We do have a good, you know, agenda for the year and some programs that we think will benefit everyone. So again, while many of our programs focus directly on family businesses because there are some unique challenges, we think they benefit all businesses. So feel free to pass along information to others. I think one of the other benefits of the Family Business Alliance are our professionally facilitated peer groups. I had served as a peer group facilitator for many years and saw firsthand the sharing that takes place, the growth among the members. We're very thoughtful in placing folks in peer groups where there's no competitors in that peer group. So we look for a well-rounded group. And again, the professionals that facilitate really are very qualified. So I would encourage you, if you're not a member, you may want to look into that. It's a great opportunity to continue to learn. We've just opened our 5th group, and it's a next generation group. So for those of you in that next generation of leadership, this might be a great opportunity for you to learn and kind of, you know, gain some intelligence from some other folks in a similar position as you. So again, this year we have excellent programs. In March, we're hosting a workshop to discuss marketing strategies for small and family businesses. And it sounds crazy, but it's TikTok for business and how to use it and market to the masses. Bell Media Group is going to be sharing insights with us and how to make it work for your business, because that's where the younger buyers are. You can register for our events at the greaterreading.org website or watch the Greater Reading Chamber Alliance Facebook page for updates on upcoming events. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it and have a great rest of your day. Take care.